Good to have you all here. Wow. I mean, it only took 4 years, just 4 years, but we finally got the truth. It's what I had said all along from the very beginning, that there was a very deliberate bias against the former president of the United States, and they were going to do whatever they could to inflict harm upon him, upon his campaign, and therefore, if you ask me, upon the entire country. Because we have just learned with the release of the Durham report, John Durham's investigation into why exactly we had the Mueller investigation, why exactly any of this happened to begin with, we just got the results. And sure enough, they had nothing, literally nothing. The FBI had no evidence on which to base their claims, and yet they went forward anyway. And now I got all kinds of questions about whether they're trying to go forward again, whether they did in 2020, and whether they're doing it all over again. This seems to me, at face value, to be a kind of weaponization of our government, because you know what? We ought to be able to count on these institutions to do the right thing. We're going to tackle all of it. We're going to tackle what's going on today, what went on in 2024, and I got some updates for you. Miller Lite, we talked about that one yesterday. The company is digging in their heels, and I'm just going to say, you know what, guys? Watch out, because I have a feeling that if people get as angry about Miller Lite as they are about Bud Light, you're going to have real problems there over at the parent company, Molson Coors. We'll discuss that. Fox News ratings, they continue to lose more viewers. Ever since Tucker Carlson left, I'll give you the latest numbers. Meanwhile, some Congress members are going to the U.S. Navy and demanding answers. What are we doing here? Trying to recruit people by hiring a drag queen to do so. This is our Navy, after all. And, you know, a woke Navy is not going to be able to win wars, dare we say. Hello, welcome back to the show, everyone. A live edition of today's program. Great to see all of you here. I'm looking at your comments. Leslie, my good friend that I usually see over on the Locals platform, back with us here today. Wonderful to see you all. Portions of the show are brought to you, as always, by LegacyPMInvestments.com. If you're interested in investing in gold, I highly recommend you go check out their website, LegacyPMInvestments.com. You can buy and sell gold and silver right there. You can also give them a ring. They're very good about walking you through it, talking about your portfolio, your risk portfolio, etc. Go give them a ring, 1-866-589-0560. Okay, Mr. John Durham, you know, we waited, but you had a lot of writing to do. I get it. It's meant I've had a lot of reading to do, guys. I mean, wow. This is really something. But I read the whole Mueller report, parts 1 and part 2. Part 1, far more interesting. And I will get through all of this as well. I promise. All 300, and I believe it was 316 when it was all said and done. Of course, that included the introduction. But what really just sort of struck me overall is just some of the most obvious things that should have been followed up on and investigated. I mean, why are we taking political operatives' words for anything? I'm a journalist, okay? I'm a reporter. When I get a tip, do I then say, okay, well, I'm going to run to air with this tip? No, I investigate the tip. I do my research because, you know, that's what you're supposed to do. And I would think that the FBI would be willing to do the same. But you know what? I'm naive to assume so. I guess, you know, in this particular case, they really, really, really did not want Donald Trump in there. I mean, we know that, of course. I'm just pulling up some more of your comments here as I look over to the side. We know that they did not want Donald Trump. But to actually do what they did, to weaponize the U.S. government against innocent individuals because, you know, they just happen to be working on the Trump campaign. I mean, that is really and truly unacceptable stuff. And we can't allow that to happen. I want to get into some of these details, but, you know, I just have to say from the start, we cannot allow that to happen. This was really over the top, unacceptable, uncalled for, and frankly, really undermines, if you ask me, any kind of faith that we have or should have in our government. Right? I mean, when people talk about the lack of faith they have in institutions, whether it's the Federal Reserve, whether it's the Oval Office, whether it's Capitol Hill, I mean, we don't have any. And when you see something like this, and when you see the mainstream media totally write it off, which is exactly what they're doing, right? They're like, oh, no big deal, nothing to see here. Who cares? You know, it's 4 years later. I care. Because what we have learned is that our government so didn't want Donald Trump in office that they were willing to just take any bit of ammunition that came their way, no matter how outrageous, and say, oh, okay, this is enough for us to wiretap Trump Tower and Carter Page. Just insane. Let me just, read some of these parts for you. I mean, and it gets even more wild. There was apparently a guy who was a DNC op who came up with that insane, very explicit, I don't even want to say what it is, the whole thing with the dossier, came up with that little tale on his own. They were never able to figure that one out because apparently Trump hadn't even stayed at that particular hotel in that particular suite where they were alleging these things happened. So they had no evidence. And yet, what did they do? They investigated Donald Trump's 2016 campaign anyway, just relying on all these opposition tips. That is extremely disturbing. Really, really disturbing. They called it Crossfire Hurricane, and it was later handed over to Robert Mueller, who found that there was no criminal conspiracy between Donald Trump's campaign and Russia. No, that wasn't there. That was just all created. I mean, if you really wanted to think about the Russians, I mean, you could have gone right back to, I don't want to indulge in conspiracy theories, but, between the Clinton Global Initiative and the Russia connections they had, and then some uranium deals. I mean, you could have gone down that path in a whole lot of different ways that didn't lead actually to Trump, but maybe to his rival. Those were allegations that were out there too, but those allegations you see went nowhere. The crazy allegations about Donald Trump, those took on a life of its own. I mean, we spent tons of money, millions of dollars. It consumed America for years. What a waste of time. Really and truly, like we did this to ourselves. I'll tell you, if Russia wanted to tear us apart in any way, shape, or form, all Putin had to do is call Hillary Clinton. Because Hillary Clinton and the Democrats, by creating all of this, actually did any rival nation's job for them. So, bottom line, law enforcement had no actual evidence of any kind of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. It's just incredible. The other thing that I think is very interesting and he cites in here is the preferential treatment given to Hillary Clinton. Remember the investigation into her emails versus that of Donald Trump. And he cites the fact that Clinton and other officials received defensive briefings about being the possible targets of foreign interference, whereas Donald Trump didn't get that. No, he got no such briefing. The FBI just went and opened a probe, boom, into 4 members of his campaign. Remember how angry he was? I'll never forget that day. I think it was like a Saturday morning. I woke up and I saw some of his tweets that had gone out probably in the middle of the night. And he was livid, like absolutely positively livid to find out that effectively somebody was spying on his campaign people. Carter Page, of course, was the first name that came up. 4 members of his campaign were spied upon. Durham wrote that the department and the FBI failed to uphold their important mission of strict fidelity to the law in connection with certain events and activities described in this report. He goes on to say, I mean, this is upsetting, guys. This should make you furious. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. I don't care if you hate Donald Trump. The fact that this happened, this is not good. Senior FBI personnel displayed a serious lack of analytical rigor toward the information that they received. I wonder why. Especially information from politically affiliated persons and entities. I mean, what is like journalism 101? Understand your source. Understand the bias of your source. be able to account for that bias and be able to temper it somehow, some way by going and getting other source material, preferably non-political. I mean, why couldn't these people go and just maybe call the hotel and find out if Donald Trump had ever stayed there? Did that ever occur to them? It might have, but you see, that's not what they wanted to do. They had their answer. They had their crime. It was pretty wild and pretty out there, but they wanted to somehow be able to investigate him and fill in the dots and scare the American public so that he would not win election. And then once he did, they took it even further. They wanted him out. And so they engaged in all that they did, including releasing this information, remember, to the press. Durham's report, of course, came out just yesterday afternoon. I was actually live on Instagram. I don't do that often, but I figured it was, I'd already been live with you guys. I'm like, you know what? You might get sick of me. But this was a breaking news kind of situation. Anyway, Durham's report, it came out, of course, yesterday. No redactions. It was released to Attorney General Merrick Garland on Friday. And guess what's happening now? Now Jim Jordan is demanding that Durham come and testify before Congress, and Matt Gaetz wants some heads to roll. So this is going to become very political. And you know what? I say this as an American who loves our country and really wishes we were not so divided right now. I wish it didn't have to become political, because I wish these organizations were not political to begin with. I understand, all right? Let me just play devil's advocate and be fair, as I always am. But let me be fair for a moment and just say, okay, I got it. Like, you get these allegations, and they're kind of out there, and you have a duty to follow up. I mean, I often will sort of sit and try and digest a story, make calls, talk to sources before I come out with an opinion on something, because you don't want to be out over your skis, so to speak. In this case, if they're getting this information, okay, fine. Why wouldn't you then try and source the information? Why would you actually be relying on opposition research firms like Fusion GPS that's hired by the law firm that represents Hillary Clinton? And then Fusion GPS goes out and hires Chris Steele, who then goes and hires a guy who, by the way, they thought at the time might have been a Russian spy. I mean, you can't make this up. It's so convoluted and it's so obvious what was going on. And it leads me to more concerns about what has continued to go on. According to the report, the FBI improperly continued to rely on unsubstantiated allegations in the Steele dossier when it applied for court-approved warrant applications to monitor the communications of Carter Page. So they're applying for these applications. One guy, actually, Kevin Kleinsmith, who's sort of a low-level attorney, he admits that he kind of altered something in order to get an easier approval because they wanted to do this wiretapping stuff. I mean, could you not have called the hotel? Could you not have found your own sources? Do you have to rely on a bunch of political hacks that are feeding you a bunch of junk that you just want to hear because you want to take the guy down? It's a big deal, a really big deal. And we should be worried again, because in 2020, you had 51 hack spies, a bunch of political hacks that had had bureaucratic careers in various areas of our intelligence departments. And apparently, according to the guy who assembled everyone, he was the former acting CIA director, Mike Morrell, apparently he told Congress that it was Antony Blinken's idea. Antony Blinken, who's now our Secretary of State. Antony Blinken has said, oh, it couldn't possibly because I'm not political. Well, you're a little bit political. After all, you were working on the Biden campaign in 2020. So you had 51 spies coming together to write a letter about how that Hunter Biden laptop was nothing but a Russian disinformation operation. In fact, the New York Post, which originally reported on this and then was locked out of its Twitter account because of it, and probably lost a lot of revenue, et cetera, with advertisers, you name it, because this was no-go territory. turned out to all be true, but these spies were trying to say, this is Russian disinformation. So they got all together. Antony Blinken allegedly told Mike Morrell, hey, let's come up with this idea. Mike Morrell spearheaded the whole thing. He wrote to John Brennan in an email. John Brennan, by the way, another deep state op who was the one saying that the whole dossier was true. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, they're just a bunch of liars for political reasons. Can I add your name to the list? This is when Morrell was putting together all his ex-spies to say this was Russian disinformation. He wrote, quote, trying to give the campaign, particularly during the debate on October 22nd, 2020, a talking point to push back on Trump on this issue. To which Brennan responded, okay, Michael, add my name to the list. Good initiative. Thanks for asking me to sign on. So they had another initiative, basically, an initiative that they had not checked out. I mean, they didn't know whether or not this was real or not. They might have known, actually, that it in fact was real, but they were making a calculated political choice to do this. Now, weren't they? Curious to get some of your reactions here. Again, if you're listening to the podcast on Apple iTunes, this is a live edition. I encourage you to come over and watch the video and join our crowd here as we talk about all of these things. We got a lot to get into today. We got the Navy, as I said, and Miller Lite, for goodness sakes. Miller Lite hasn't learned a darn thing from the Bud Light debacle. Anyway, just wanted to see what some of you are saying. Leslie's pointing out that it's been 4 whole years. Wow, just insane. Jake, good to see you back here again. The Fed was asleep at the switch. All of this could have been avoided. Jake says, yes, our federal government indeed was asleep at the switch. Except that they weren't, in the sense, and I don't know if you're talking about the Federal Reserve, we can talk about gold in a little bit, but if you talk about our federal government being asleep at the switch, not just asleep at the switch, it wasn't just incompetence. I mean, I've thought about that. Like, are they just, it was incompetence at best. But this is so much worse than incompetence, guys. This was, in my estimation, pretty deliberate. They were making deliberate choices because they just didn't like the guy. And they wanted Hillary Clinton to win. And so all of this was designed. And once he won, they wanted to have some ammunition, to take him down. Remember the whole, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page thing, that whole scandal? Because they wanted to be able to take the president down. I mean, we went through so much. It was such a tumultuous time, a difficult 4 years. The news cycle was insane. And instead of actually focusing on the policy issues that mattered, no, the media was caught up in this nonsense. You'd listen to, say, I don't know, Rachel Maddow over on MSNBC, who sounded like quite a conspiracy theorist herself, going on and on about all the reasons why that dossier was likely true, except it wasn't. It wasn't. And now the media is saying, oh, well, there's no there. I mean, nobody's been arrested. Nobody yet, by the way. Nobody yet, because I will be very interested to see what comes out of these congressional hearings that will be held. And I think John Durham needs to be up there. We need to hear questions from Congress. We need answers. We need to know how our FBI did this. They say that they've got checks in place to make sure that this won't happen in the future. Corrective actions have been in place for some time. Yeah, I'll listen. I hope so, but I want some proof. And so they do need to be up there. They need to talk before Congress, and we have questions that need to be answered. It's important for, I think, everyone's faith in our government, which has been so clearly eroded, massively eroded. But, again, the mainstream media is like, nothing to see here. Move on. Well, it's kind of not that easy. You see, they want to move on. They want to forget about this, because if you really dig down, what you'll find is this kind of behavior. This behavior happened again in 2020 in some way, shape, or form. There's some speculation right now that one of the people behind that letter of the 51 spies that was sent to Politico One of those people was actually currently employed at the time in the CIA. So if you have another thing like that, and perhaps look at what's going on now, another version of this with all these cases coming at Trump, I suspect you've got some real heads that could eventually roll. I mean, whether or not it will happen, we'll see. But I think if nothing else, Americans now know better. We know not to trust what they're telling us, like at all. I want to get to the Navy recruiter. I want to get to Miller Lite. Before I do that, just once again, a quick shout out to our great sponsor over at Legacy Precious Metals, because this is a team that is really hoping you make out okay in the long run, right? Because these economic fundamentals are not so hot, shall we say. Janet Yellen really worked up that we may actually default on June 1st. I'll tell you, if we default, game over. Game over. Joe Biden ought to be down on his hands and knees, begging to make sure that we cut all kinds of spending to make the Republicans happy. Because if he goes down in history as the guy that defaulted on debt, I mean, that's about as bad as you're ever going to get. I don't think he's going to allow that. I don't think anybody would really allow that. But it's almost sickening, the kind of political gamemanship that they play. Anyway, Charles Thorngren, who's the CEO of the company, he was on the show the other day, and his point was, even if we get through this, it doesn't change the fundamental problems, which happen to be that we're sort of bankrupt, according to him. I mean, look, if you thought about this in any other way, shape, or form, if you considered what a company or family, the situation they might be in, if they owed so much debt relative to GDP, they'd be bankrupt. So anyway, we owe $31.4 trillion. Nobody's willing to cut anything. And as a result, we might be looking at inflation for the foreseeable future. Well, Charles makes the point that gold is one way to hedge that. So go check them out. LegacyPMinvestments.com. You can buy gold and silver. You can buy small little pocket. You can get like the little coins. You can get a gold bar. You can get a gold IRA, all kinds of different instruments. You can get the gold in the vault or a lot of gold delivered, I don't know, to your safe deposit box. So give them a ring, 1-866-589-0560, or check it out online. All right, turning back to this Navy recruiter story. Guys, what do you think of this? Because I'm happy. I'm surprised it took so long, but we have a series of GOP lawmakers as well as Navy veterans that have come forward and said, you know what? We want to understand just exactly what this is. Why do we have a digital ambassador? What is the point of this drag queen digital ambassador? After all, don't you want your military to kind of be tough? Isn't that part of the whole idea? I mean, why are we just going down this path? They are writing now to the Navy, and they're saying they want to express their grave concerns over reports that the U.S. Navy recruited a drag queen to join, quote, the digital ambassador program to promote Navy recruitment on the CCP-influenced app TikTok. Interesting, right? I mean, look, TikTok is owned by the CCP. And I would imagine that China would kind of love it if our military became very woke and therefore maybe not as strong. It was banned from official devices by the U.S. Navy back in 2019. And this is where our Navy is recruiting. So despite facing what a Navy spokesperson has described as, quote, the most challenging recruiting environment since the start of the all-volunteer force, like nobody wants to join this right now, the Biden administration's Department of Navy continues to implement radical, reckless, and woke policies that deter capable recruits from volunteering to defend this nation's freedoms. As Navy veterans, they write, we understand that a woke military is a weak military. Well said. And this was signed by, you had Andy Harris of Maryland, Dan Crenshaw of Texas, Mike Garcia of California, the list goes on, Ronnie Jackson of Texas. It comes, of course, in response to this uproar over this Navy digital ambassador. So much for recruiting the best, brightest, strongest. Look, I mean, if you want to be a drag queen, like, go do that. Really, like you're welcome to go hit the cabaret clubs on Saturday night. I don't think you want to do that in the military, in the Navy. It's like if you want to be an actress, you don't join the Navy. If you want to be a television broadcaster, you don't join the Navy. If you want to be a drag queen, maybe you shouldn't join the Navy. Just saying. All right, let's look at this new poll that just came out. Wow, Donald Trump should be pretty happy. I mean, I've said all along, like, the nomination is his. I don't see how anyone really can beat him at this stage. I think, some people are quite smart, like Ted Cruz is staying to the sidelines. He's not running, he said. Why do it? I've said from the beginning, I think that there's probably a lot of people and a lot of money pressuring Ron DeSantis to run right now, but it's not going to happen. Check this out. Morning Consult. Trump is at 61% in the Republican field. He's up 43 points over DeSantis, who's at 18%, Mike Pence, who's at 6%, Nikki Haley, 4%, Vivek Ramaswamy at 4%. I like to cheer for the underdog there. Vivek was on the show the other day, and what I like about Vivek is he's very smart, very smart. I mean, just an incredible educational pedigree, Harvard, Yale, created and sold two very good biotech companies. So he's independently wealthy and thus funded by himself. And he's totally seeing through and saw through it initially with his book, Woke Inc., all this woke nonsense, which, the likes of Miller Lite, Molson Coors as the parent company, seem to be adapting right now alongside Bud Light. So Ramaswamy's at 4%, not bad for a guy who just kind of popped up out of nowhere. You've got Cheney at 2%, Abbott at 1%, T. Scott at 1%, Hutchinson at 1%. So look, it's Trump's. It's Trump's. And the left is terrified. And so I think it's important that you remember, if you want to read it, make sure you have a lot of toner in your printer. I learned that the hard way. I think I had to replace it. Anyway, make sure you read it because this is critical to understand right now. This is important to comprehend just the level of what they'll go to try and keep someone out of the running. Again, I'm just looking back at your comments, everyone. So great to have you here. Very, very good to see you. It is kind of crazy. Somebody's asking questions on my makeup. We were talking about makeup the other day. A little bit of a segue, again, for my podcast listeners. I just want to remind you that we got a lot more to talk about here today, including some of the stuff that's going on at Fox. I want to get to that. I also want to get back to Miller Lite and why I am not a fan of 1-800-Flowers. I was talking so much with you guys just the other day that I forgot to tell you that story. I remember I told you at the beginning we were going to get into it. Anyway, somebody's asking about my makeup. So my makeup is kind of a hodgepodge of stuff, but I can tell you one thing. It's not, and that's Maybelline. And that has a little something to do with, might it
Here's
be,
a little known fact.
Might it be
Women.
This guy right here?
Hi. Impressive carrying skills,
Although this
right?
is not the,
I got some Bud Lights for us.
This is not
I kept hearing about this thing
Maybelline
called
commercial.
March Madness, and I thought we were all just having a hectic month, but it turns out
Not
it has
the
something
Maybelline
to do with
commercial,
sports.
but,
and I'm not sure exactly
he did
which
one as well.
sport.
So
but
in
either
part
way,
because of that, I'm just like, you know what? Who needs it? I've used Maybelline forever. I'm moving on. So I over the years have managed to accumulate quite a bit of makeup, as you can imagine. Quite a bit of clothing, as you can imagine, too. I mean, it's like one of the perks of being in television. They give you lots of makeup and lots of clothes. So I have a lot of makeup. I probably don't need to buy any for a long time. So I'm trying out different things. That's the honest to God truth. I'm trying out different makeup because all the Maybelline that I used to use is now in the trash. Anyway, turning back to the stories at hand right now, I do want to get to this Fox video to show you just an update here on how Fox is doing. They are in some ways kind of becoming the new Bud Light. I mean, it's except that it's now Miller Lite, but Fox has alienated its audience quite extraordinarily by getting rid of Tucker Carlson, as we suspected they would. And I was looking at the numbers, and they're off more than 50% now from where Tucker was. And this is pretty startling. So the latest numbers coming in showing us 1.3 million people tuned into the 8 p.m. show last night. Now you're like, okay, that's pretty good. Like 1.3 million, that's a lot, right? It's not good. It's not good when you consider that Bill O'Reilly was upwards of 4 million. Tucker Carlson was upwards of 3 million. And now they've had that number cut certainly in half, down in the 1.3 range. And I'm not sure that they're ever really going to get that back. I think that this is kind of a different moment in time. You've heard me talk about this before. There's so many different ways to get news now. You know, we're here talking right now live on YouTube, and I'm able to see your comments. I'm able to talk with you. I get to answer your makeup questions. I mean, hey, this is a whole different ball game than anything we've been able to experience before, certainly in my career. In my career, it has been, you know, teleprompter, television commercials, the whole shebang. And this is a whole different environment. So I think as a result of Tucker leaving, you have a lot of people in the conservative space, I mean, probably at least 1.5 million of them, that are looking for something new. This is why Newsmax is now beating CNN. I mean, it's not hard to beat CNN. CNN has always been kind of a train wreck, and they're struggling over there because they're having their identity crisis. And Fox is having a version of its. You know, I don't quite understand why they did that. I'm shocked that they did that. I was shocked that they got rid of me, but you know, I didn't have the number one. I was 8 o'clock on the redheaded stepchild network, right? Which was taking viewership away, you could argue, from the mothership. So in some ways, you could see that they maybe had a business reason to say, okay, well, you know, all this has happened and we don't like her point of view, and thus who needs this show? Because basically, no matter how well she does, it is still a drain on the mothership, because that means maybe viewers aren't watching Tucker. And then no matter how badly she does, it's still a drain, right? Because then, you know, if you're not getting the numbers, so damned if you do, damned if you don't. I never should have taken the gig, right? Anyway, it stunned me, of course, but simultaneously, I think that, you know, you could say, all right, well, there's a business reason here. What was the business reason for getting rid of Tucker Carlson? I'll ask you guys that question. What was the business reason there? Because I think there had to be one. I do think that those that run Fox and own Fox have thick skin. And even if he was shooting his mouth off, saying really unpleasant things about management or possibly about, you know, Rupert's little girlfriend who, you know, was like however many, 40 years younger, whatever. I mean, he could have said some inappropriate things on his text message. But look, Rupert has thick skin and he's been in this business for a while. And what does he care as long as the guy's making him a ton of money? And Tucker certainly was. I mean, he really made them a lot of money. So what exactly happened? I do have my suspicions that this may have been about two people, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer, who 5 weeks earlier had been on the floor of the Senate saying, we need to regulate Fox News and Tucker Carlson. I mean, that could have put the fear of God into them. Who knows, right? I mean, maybe they were really, really worried. Don't forget, Rupert Murdoch lost that deal for Sky over in the UK. It was like a $15 billion merger. And the reason he lost it was because of Ofcom not feeling that he was appropriate enough as a broadcaster, et cetera, right? And part of that was tied to Fox. So he had been through a pretty challenging experience in that sense. I mean, we are not the UK and we don't have Ofcom, but crazier things have happened like this, right? So who's to say maybe he wasn't, in fact, really worried that there would be some regulatory action against Fox. But I'll tell you, no good deed goes unpunished because, you know, they were like, I mean, the moral of the story is you have to be very careful because if they get one, they'll take another and they'll take another and they'll take another. In other words, these people are really relentless and they're not going to stop. You have AOC now attacking, by the way, CNN. How dare they run that Trump town hall, even though the guy's clearly going to be the nominee for the Republican Party. And you have more people, of course, still furious with Fox, so much so that I guess they're having some big ad meetings and all that kind of. They're psyched, right? Because 40 advertisers have come back to the 8 p.m. time slot now that Tucker's gone. So you get the advertisers back. You don't have the ratings, but maybe at least some people are willing to advertise. Or are they? Or are they? This was apparently parked outside 1211 Avenue of the Americas earlier today. So for those of you on the Apple podcast listening just to the audio, what we are watching or did watch actually was in fact some video of Fox, and there's a campaign, there's a big truck, it says, drop Fox, hashtag drop Fox. And they're pointing to a lot of Tucker stuff. Of course, Tucker's not there anymore, but that's not going to stop them. They're saying, you need to drop Fox. So that's meant to kind of spook the advertisers. Look, this is a business. And I would just say what's interesting to me is if you think about it as a business, I get why, there's all this stuff coming out about Tucker and they're leaking things and people are wondering who's doing the leaking. I would just say, look, any of these organizations need to protect their quote unquote property in that they built Tucker into becoming quite a star. He, of course, had to have the natural talent, but let's be honest. He had a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful platform. So because he had this incredible platform, he was able to get the word out in a much bigger way than, if he was just, I guess, broadcasting from his basement, which he may be able to do very soon and do so very, very successfully on Twitter because he's built this audience. But from Fox's standpoint, they're like, hang on, you're ours. We have the right to bench you, which is what they did. Same thing happened to me. They had the right to bench me as long as they paid out the contract. And we don't want you going anywhere else because we don't want any other entity to benefit from you. But I'm wondering, and I do have to go back and look at my old contract. I'm wondering if there's anything in there that would pertain to internet, right? Because everything's been changing so fast. And maybe there's nothing in there that says he can't stream live. I don't know the answer to that. But even so, look, it's going to be Twitter's sort of benefit. And so all the sort of prestige or fame that was built up by being in that 8 o'clock time slot is now getting handed over to someone else. And hopefully that's Tucker. Hopefully Tucker is the one that's going to benefit from that. But indeed, whatever platform he chooses will also benefit too. So it's a very interesting one to watch. And it's, been kind of on the down low lately. We haven't heard as much. Probably they're still working through legal negotiations. I wish them both well. I do. But I think it's going to be hard for Fox. I think it's going to be very hard to replace his time slot. And I also think it's going to be extremely difficult for viewers to have any more trust. They've already gone looking elsewhere. And once they go looking elsewhere, they're going to find new channels, new places, new content. You guys are here with me. Please make sure that you hit the subscribe button and the bell. I'm working on the certain time every single day. But in the meantime, do me that favor. Hit the bell so that you know when I'm here live and we can continue all of our great conversations. Miller Lite. This is my favorite story. This Bud Light. I know you guys like this story too. I'm just going to fix my chair. Hang on one second. Miller Lite is really, they need marketing help. They need help because this was an easy one to kind of deflect from and say, we're sorry, we really didn't mean anything by this, blah, blah, blah. Maybe they could, but no, they doubled down. It's kind of a little bit like when the CEO of Anheuser-Busch said, oh, no, this is misinformation. The whole Dylan Mulvaney thing, this is just misinformation. It was just one campaign, just one influencer. No big deal. And then they ran all those commercials and they had the country music. Everybody's in their pickup truck, hanging out, drinking beer. Well, nobody believes it. Nobody believes it. It's like you're pandering to us. You think that's what we want now, so now you're trying to give it to us. Well, we see through you. We see through you. We saw through Alyssa here.
I'm a businesswoman. I had a really clear job to do when I took over Bud Light. And it was, this brand is in decline. It's been in decline for a really long time. And if we do not attract young drinkers to come and drink this brand, there will be no future for Bud Light. So I had this super clear mandate. It's like we need to evolve and elevate this incredibly iconic brand. And what I brought to that was a belief in, okay, what does evolve and elevate mean? It means inclusivity. It means shifting the tone. It means having a campaign that's truly inclusive and feels lighter and brighter and different and appeals to women and to men. Mm-hmm. And representation is at sort of the heart of evolution. You've got to see people who reflect you in the work. And we had this hangover. I mean, Bud Light had been kind of a brand of fratty, kind of out of touch humor. And it was really important that we had another approach.
No, you got another approach, all right. A very different very fresh approach that managed to alienate all of your customers. I mean, you guys have seen the video, right? Like, they can't give this stuff away. People will drink anything except Bud Light. They will drink water before they will drink beer if it is made by Bud Light. And the rest of the company. I mean, unbelievable. You've seen the sales numbers. It was down 26.1% for sales of Bud Light in the latest numbers. Well, it's now down 11 point something percent for Budweiser. So Budweiser is, the full-bodied version of the Bud Light. People don't want Budweiser anymore. And guess what else? They don't want the Modelo Especial anymore, right? I mean, this is what is going to continue happening. And there's one other, Mick Ultra, they don't want that anymore. Those sales were down 4%. Modelo Especial down 4%. Budweiser down 11%. And, of course, Bud Light down 26%. Well, the newest and latest and greatest to join this party happens to be Miller Lite. So Miller Lite is the one beer I kept saying, this is interesting. People are going to go to Coors Light, they're going to go to Miller Lite, and they're going to do this. And guess who's going to benefit? Molson Coors. Molson Coors, ticker symbol TAP. Let's take a look at where it is. TAP. So TAP is the rival to Bud, which is traded under ticker symbol BUD. And this is unbelievable. I'm looking at the stock price. It is just getting hammered. Wow. Okay, so down almost 1% today, $63.19 a share. I mean, this stock had been doing great. It had been doing great. The whole Dylan Mulvaney thing basically put it in a whole different position. And I'm looking at it after hours trading right now. It's actually down even further, 1.4% in after hours trading, because investors are not stupid. Investors know, even if there's only one little lonely analyst over at HSBC, not even an American bank, that's calling this out and saying, sales are going to be lower for Bud Light, which means Anheuser-Busch could have a problem. And if the boycott spreads, as it is spreading, it could be even more of a problem. That analyst spelled it all out in a recent report. Well, Molson Coors, they were the beneficiary. They have two brands that everybody was migrating to. This is very replaceable, right? It's beer. It's frankly not the best beer. I actually don't drink much beer. I mean, I've had a Guinness now and then. Good Irish girl, right, with her Guinness. But I'm not really much of a beer drinker. But I would say that Bud Light is not very tasty. And you can substitute Coors Light and probably be better off, or Miller Lite and be better off. So these companies are owned by Molson Coors. And Molson Coors, ticker symbol TAP, was doing great. It's like they were like, rah, 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 look at what's happening with Bud Light. Everybody's coming over here. Sales of Miller Lite and Coors Light were both up 13% each. You compare and contrast that with Bud Light being down 26%. You see what was going on, right? People were just making the trade. And so Molson Coors was benefiting. But it turns out there was this little video that came out, maybe 3 weeks before the Dylan Mulvaney thing, and nobody noticed. Nobody noticed at all. Not until yesterday. Not until yesterday. So now the joke is Miller Lite to Bud Light, hold my beer. This one's not perhaps as aggravating as Dylan Mulvaney, but nonetheless, when you see their response, I'm going to get to that in a second. When you see Miller Lite's response to this, you might be a little aggravated.
Here's a little known fact. Women were among the very first to brew beer ever. From Mesopotamia to the Middle Ages to colonial America, women were the ones doing the brewing. Centuries later, how did the industry pay homage to the founding mothers of beer? They put us in bikinis. Wow. Look at this wild. It's time beer made it up to women. So today, Miller Lite is on a mission to clean up not just their but the whole beer industry's Miller Lite has been scouring the internet for all this and buying it back so that they can turn it into good for women brewers. Literally, good How, you ask?
You get the picture. And so the whole idea is they're taking this fertilizer and they're making it into beer for women brewers because they somehow feel really bad about a 2003 catfight ad. That's the video I should have gotten for you guys, right? There was a catfight ad with bikini-clad women featuring Pamela Anderson, Sofia Vergara, Tanya Ballinger. So all these like bikini-clad, very good-looking women were having some kind of I don't know, some kind of cat fight. Maybe they were wrestling. I don't know exactly. I got to find this and we'll show that tomorrow. Come back for that one. Anyway, so they had this ad that they were running. And this is sort of like their apology because it was Women's History in March and they wanted to honor women. I'll give them this. You know what? At least they didn't do what ESPN did, which was to honor Leah Thomas, the biologically born man that then went and cost women the opportunity to have a record in the freestyle. Anyway, so they decide they're going to like make it back to women because in 2003 they made this commercial with all these girls in bikinis and somehow that's not okay in their book anymore. And so the woman who runs marketing there came up with this whole thing. And so now everybody's like, wait a second. Gosh darn, I mean, like Miller Lite's woke too? Like, what are we to do? Like, everybody's going so woke and it's getting really annoying. Local brewers, by the way. Support local business. Go to your local brewer. You're going to pay a little bit more, but believe me, it's worth it. And it will be better beer. Anyway, so they're like, what am I going to do? And so now the company is, kind of getting a little bit nervous. I told you the stock price down today. Let me take a look at Bud. Tap's shares losing ground again, almost 1% again today. Wow. Bud. Whoa. They're below $60 a share. They're down 2.24% in today's trading. So this is real. You know what? Like these boycotts, they often come and go, but this one is real. It's real for Anheuser-Busch. I would expect at some point you're probably going to see a change in management there because the CEO is not going to be able to contain this. As more and more Americans say, all right, I don't want to drink Bud Light anymore. Not only am I not drinking Bud Light, I'm not drinking Budweiser. And I'm not drinking anything else that happens to be in their stable. And by the way, they got like hundreds of beers. So go check those out. So that's happening there. Now Miller Lite having a very similar problem owned by Carlson. Carlson was like the stock, right? They were holding up. I've done in this program, I've shown you the charts and been like the Molson Coors has totally benefited from this. And yet they made this video like 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks prior, 3 weeks prior to the Dylan Mulvaney one. Nobody had really seen it. It just caught on yesterday in the media. Now everybody wants to boycott Miller Lite. And when you hear the response, I mean, they're just saying, they're doubling down. I mean, they are totally doubling down on woke. They're like, no, we're not going to apologize for our 1 minute and 30-second advertisement featuring that comedian woman and bad to good. I can't say certain things, but you get the idea. Like they have all these swear words in it. They seem quite proud of that. That's like making them, redeem themselves. I'm sorry. I mean, it's just sort of stupid. Anyway, the spokesperson for Molson Coors hit back at the claims that the advertisement was too woke, telling, in this case, Daily Mail, dailymail.com, great site, this video was about two things, worm poop and saying women shouldn't be forced to mud wrestle in order to sell beer. Neither of these things should be remotely controversial, and we hope beer drinkers can appreciate the humor and ridiculousness of this video from back in March. Well, I don't know as they really appreciate it. I think, not that it's as bad as the other one, but here's what's really going on. I think what's happened is that everybody suddenly realized that all these corporations care about is remaking society in a way that they believe should be fit. And so it's a window, if you would, into their thinking, into their thought process. And do not forget what's behind it. You know what I'm talking about. ESG, environmental, social governance. That is what dictates what so many of these corporations are deciding to do. Let's see if we can check shares in Nike, because Nike also did a deal, of course, with Dylan Mulvaney. It didn't quite have the same sort of viral effect of people being angry. I mean, I was angry. You heard me. Yeah, I was angry because you know what? Like, here's what really ticked me off about it. He was advertising a sports bra. And, a sports bra actually has a specific purpose, because when you run as a woman, you got different things going on, right? Like, it's as though, if you had a woman advertising a jock strap, it wouldn't really make sense. So this is somebody who has not completed the transition, which is quite evident when you see the pictures. And so for this person, Dylan Mulvaney, to be wearing or advertising a sports bra, it's basically a giant FU to women from Nike, the manufacturer of the sports bras. I mean, it's such a charade. And I think that did strike more of a core than you've really heard about. I mean, think about women are sort of the CFOs of their family. We're the ones that do all the purchasing, the household purchasing. We're the ones that get the kids sneakers and backpacks and athletic equipment and gear. And you know what? We don't have to buy Nike. Plenty of other companies to choose from. And I'm looking at Nike shares right now, down almost 3% in trading today. So that is not good for the company. And if I look at it over the last 5 days, they've really been hurting from $126 a share down now to $116 and change. So it does appear as though this boycott, so to speak, is catching up with Nike. It might take a little bit longer. It's not as easy and as quick a trade as something like Bud Light or Miller Lite. But this wokeness in American corporations, which has just caught on like wildfire, they are so lacking in sensitivity to what their customers actually want. And that is a problem. Speaking of companies that have no sensitivity to what their customers want, 1-800-Flowers. I have a lot to say on this. Thank you for all your kind wishes about Mother's Day. I had a wonderful Mother's Day with my family, but it could have been better if I didn't have to spend like an hour on the phone with a call center overseas because I had ordered flowers from my mom and from my mother-in-law. And okay, I know, stupid me. I went to 1-800-Flowers. It was like, okay, well, I have to get 2 of them. It was early enough in the week that I figured I had time. You know, like I get it. If you're ordering on Friday for Saturday delivery, that's different. But I was ordering earlier in the week and it said no problem. In fact, it could have delivered them the next day. It could have delivered them on Friday. I chose Saturday because they weren't delivering on Sunday and I paid the extra $20 fee, whatever, so I could get that. Well, I also signed up for the text messages so that I would know when it had arrived. Gave them my phone number. And so I'm waiting. Nothing sent to me on Saturday. I get no call from, any of the grandmas. And then Sunday comes around and again, still nothing. So 3-4 o'clock, I'm on the phone with the call center saying, where the heck is this? And they're like, gosh, well, it's going out on Tuesday. That would be today. Mother's Day was Sunday. I ordered this like last week. Today doesn't do me any good. No. It's Mother's Day on Sunday, not Tuesday the following week. And I didn't pay an extra $20 so that I could have it delivered on Tuesday. So they said, okay, well, we will refund your delivery cost. Gee, thanks, guys. You know what? Thanks. Because, if you had actually had decent algorithms in place to be able to anticipate the traffic that you would be getting on one of the most busy holidays for florists of the year, then maybe you might have been able to send that text message that you promised to send me and tell me that you wouldn't be there on Sunday and I should make other arrangements because, it's kind of a big deal. Like I wanted my mom to have flowers. I wanted my mother-in-law to have flowers. And they didn't have any thank you 1-800-Flowers. And you weren't even kind enough or decent enough to tell me that this was going to happen. So the story goes on. I called, I canceled everything. I'm like, forget the flowers, all right? It's over. Mother's Day is done. I don't want flowers on any other day. Okay, ma'am, yes, we will cancel your flowers. You will get the email. No email. Today, I got an email this morning saying, your flowers will be delivered. By the way, not even the flowers I ordered. Completely different. A totally different arrangement. They will be delivered. Oh, and they still charge me. They will be delivered today on Tuesday. And that was to my mom. So my mother-in-law still has no flowers. I'm still not credited for the $300+ that all these things cost. And they never got them on Mother's Day. And not one apology from the company. Not an I'm sorry. Not a text, since I gave them my cell phone saying we're trying to make amends. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Let's take a look at shares of Flowers as it's known, traded on the NASDAQ. They had earnings last week. They were talking about how great they were in terms of their algorithms. They could anticipate all of this. Oh, and they had record sales. Of course they had record sales. I mean, Whether or not they followed through with those record sales, that's a whole other thing. Whether or not they credited people who tried to cancel their orders, clearly a whole other thing. I am done with this company. $9.74. That's where they traded. They actually had a huge day, up 4%, and that is not good. This is not a good company. By the way, I have my own biases, obviously, and you do your own thing. But I will say that one of the tricky things in all seriousness for a company like this going forward is whether or not they can properly integrate technology into their platforms. I would say that my experience alone, and I know so many of you had similar ones, my experience tells me they have not been able to integrate technology in such a way that they can manage their logistics. Because don't forget, this is like a logistics business. It's like what FedEx is, right? They're a logistics business. It's what the airline business is. They need the logistics operations in place in order to get all these planes all over the country and the crews and the tickets, et cetera. So 1-800-Flowers has a very poor logistics system. That is quite obvious. And so I think the upshot of all of this for anyone is just to make sure that, as a consumer, forget them, go local, go local, go local. By the way, it wasn't even a geographical thing because my mother and my mother-in-law in two very different places. So they were having just a problem system-wide. Make sure you go local. And my advice to the company would be to do a major upgrade. They're implementing all this AI technology now so that you can, write a note with AI technology. None of them were very good. They're also trying to implement, as I read in their earnings call, just a new technology to help them with their logistics. Their logistics kind of suck. Yeah, really. I'm never going to be over this. Oh my gosh, I was pretty upset. So yeah, there's a lot going on right now. I think that we have to be cautious about what's going to happen in terms of debt ceiling. I do not believe that we are going to default on our debt. I want to calm everyone down about that, but I do think that there are challenges that are not going away. Just getting to some of your questions and comments right now. A lot of you have had problems with 1-800-Flowers. So many of you have actually tweeted me, because I even tweeted it, and I never do this. I want to point, you know what? I never do this with a company because to me, I try and keep sort of a church and state, and my personal life is my personal life. And, companies screw up. I would never want to sort of take that onto a bigger platform. But when I feel like a customer is being badly taken advantage of, and they don't know who I am in their system, or that I have a very large reach and, have millions of social media followers. They don't know that. And I'm like, you know what? It's kind of on me. It's my duty to actually warn other people, because when a company screws up that badly, you guys need to know. I've done it once before, and that was with American Airlines, and they deserved it. It was a similar thing. Like we were in Miami over New Year's. We had tickets to go back to it was New York or Boston, because we had to get to New Hampshire. It was my dad's 80th birthday. We really needed to. We were on a tight schedule, and we were on our way to the airport, and we get a note saying, sorry, we're going to send you a day later or 2 days later. And by the way, you're not going to New York or Boston, wherever it was. You're going to go to Washington, D.C. And I'm like, whoa, come on. And I spent a fortune to get new tickets out on JetBlue to get us back home. And JetBlue was great. But, this is typical of these airlines. I do believe they're trying to get some kind of new passenger bill of rights to help people with that. Looking at all of your notes, I know that everybody's saying, yeah, never, ever, ever use them. Bob, thank you for your kind words about my incredible work. I appreciate it. It's a different format here, of course, and it's a little less produced, shall we say, right? A little less bells and whistles, but more authentic. And I think that matters right now. I think authenticity is really, really, really important. Very few people will take the time to read all this. I will. I haven't read it all yet, but I will. I read every tax policy from every candidate in every election. I read these things when they matter. I read Mueller 1, Mueller 2. It's just what I feel is my responsibility to do as a journalist and as a commentator. And in order for me to have an informed viewpoint on something, I need to actually be entrenched in it and really know it. One more story. Well, a few more things just out there. SVB is in hearings right now. SVB, the regional bank that went under, we saw First Republic, of course, go under as well. I have some real fears about a regional banking crisis that just won't quit because I'm stunned at the stupidity of these banks that so clearly put their profits before stability, before their customers, in that they were all going along on treasuries. When, let's face it, what was the yield on a 30-year bond? Like 1%, 1.5%, sometimes even lower than that. I would call it 1%. Well, yeah, and then even lower. So one would have to assume that at some point in time with inflation that would change. That's why nobody wanted to really buy those bonds so much. I mean, I just thought it was the strangest thing to yield so little. 10 years too, like they were buying yields that were so low, which meant if the Fed moved at all, which you knew they were going to have to move, unless you actually believed them when they said the whole thing was transitory. I, for one, did not. You knew they were going to have to move. So you knew interest rates were going to go up eventually. And what was going to happen then? Like, why would you not hedge that portfolio, you guys? So yeah, they were stupid. So they're in these hearings right now. I'll tell you, somebody ought to pay the price because it was reckless. It was irresponsible. And, you know, where is our Federal Reserve that's supposed to be overseeing them out there in San Francisco? The San Francisco Fed was nowhere to be found. I mean, this is just wild. You had executives selling some of their stock ahead of all the bad stuff that happened. I mean, part of it may have been just automated, but I still find it pretty outrageous. And then there's another story, Elon Musk. Oh, Elon Musk is taking on George Soros. He had some pretty aggressive things to say about George Soros, including, quote, that Soros wants to erode the fabric of civilization. Soros, Musk tweeted, hates humanity. Wow. Not holding back there now, Elon, are you? See, Elon does not like it when people sell his stock. And George Soros, via his Soros Fund Management, sold his entire $16 million stake in shares of Tesla. And he only held it about a year. I'm not sure why, given where George Soros is on things, why he bought it last year and then sold it this year. Anyway, Elon took to his own social media platform that he now owns, Twitter, that is now it's got a new CEO and now in the process of being remade, so to speak. Well, he took to that and he went off on 92-year-old George Soros. In fact, he tweeted a comparison between him and, I'm not sure if I'm saying this right because I'm sure, like, I don't know X-Men comic book very well, but Magneto, the comic book character who can generate and control magnetic fields. So Elon tweeted a comparison between him and Soros. He didn't really offer an explanation, but there's some people that are saying, you know, this was likely kind of an anti-Semitic dig, only because I guess Magneto's experiences, apparently, according to some people on the internet, shaped his sort of depth of character, and that he had some kind of affiliation with, was he let me look at this more close. All right, I'm going to quote from this article for you. So a guy named Brian Cranstein, who along with his twin brother are left-leaning writers and entrepreneurs, they tweeted that Magneto, that is the X-Men comic book, his experiences shaped his perspective as well as his depth and empathy, and said Soros gets attacked nonstop for his good intentions, which some Americans think are bad merely because they disagree with political affiliations. So, Oh, and interestingly, okay, so here you go. That's what everybody keeps going back to. So the comic book's character is Magneto and is based on someone who was a Holocaust survivor. And so given, you know, that's where people get sort of bent out of shape. I don't know enough about Magneto or X-Men comic book characters to really commentate coherently on that. So I will defer to my friends who like the comic book. You guys know it. All right. So I'm going to have to do a little more research and You know, I don't know as I'm much of an X-Men fan, but for those of you that are, you probably understand the nuance of this just a little bit better. Hey, well, it's great to see you. Have you guys have you subscribed? Have you subscribed yet? Please do me that favor. I'm going to really try and be here every day, every afternoon for you. We have some interviews that are coming forward as well later today. So continue. If you hit the bell, you will see all the content that we have coming out. I have an investor interview who is very, very worried about the future. And he's cautioning people, saying you need to take kind of an active role in understanding what's going on. He is watching gold carefully. He thinks it could go higher. These are his words, because of some of the chaos that we're going to be seeing. We're also seeing, in terms of interviews, another one that I want to share with you, Brendan Tatum. It's already up, and he's talking about the border, which is, of course, obviously an issue right now, and one that I think the Biden administration keeps trying to sort of shove under the rug. Nobody wants to actually talk about the real issues, right? Nobody wants to actually talk about what's really hurting America right now. They instead prefer to talk about things like...
We know that American history has not always been a fairy tale. From the start, it's been a constant push and pull for more than 240 years between the best of us, the American ideal that we're all created equal, and the worst of us, the harsh reality that racism has long torn us apart. It's a battle that's never really over. But on the best days, enough of us have the guts and the hearts to stand up for the best in us. To choose love over hate, unity over disunity, progress over retreat. To stand up against the poison of white supremacy, as I did my inaugural address, to single out as the most dangerous terrorist threat to our homeland is white supremacy. I'm not saying this because I'm at a black HBCU. I say it wherever I go. To stand up for truth over lies, lies.
See, I don't think he does say that wherever he goes. I'm going to comment on that in just a second, but just very quickly, a shout out for my friends over at Rough Greens, another sponsor of this program. roughgreens.com/Trish. If you have a dog, believe me, this is a game changer. I have a little dog named Fluffy. Yeah, it's really his name. You know, the kids named him. Anyway, so Fluffy is this little teeny Maltese that goes places with me. He just fits in my handbag. He's the sweetest little guy in the world. And I want to make sure that he's healthy. So I take my vitamins and he takes his. You can take these as well. Well, for your dog, that is. You just sprinkle a little bit on top. It's a supplement that goes on his food every day. It has helped him enormously, certainly with his allergies, as far as I can tell, and his coat is shinier than ever. So go check out roughgreens.com/Trish. It's spelled, you get it, RUFF, roughgreens.com/Trish. But back to Mr. Biden here. I really think that, no, he does not say that on a regular basis. He does not actually go out and say white supremacy is the biggest terrorist threat to our nation. I mean, that's a leap. And my concern, and you've heard this from me before, my concern is that the more you push that narrative, the more you're going to divide America. Because I still believe America's a darn good place. And there's a reason why people from all over the world want to come to America. Because this is the one place where you actually do at least have opportunity. And it's pretty darn equal opportunity, except, of course, when you get to pockets of Chicago, pockets of LA, pockets of New York City, where you have these urban environments and you have lawmakers that don't do their jobs, don't keep their streets safe, don't require more from their teachers and the school systems. You've had a destruction of the family unit. It began, thank you very much, with our own government in the 1960s, the introduction of the WIC Act and welfare that wouldn't allow women to have a man in the family and get the check. We have done so many things wrong from a policy perspective that, yes, has put certain populations at a disadvantage. I don't disagree with that. However, that is not fundamentally who America is. We are not what Joe Biden wants you to think. And so by doing that, he's actually creating a much larger problem, for sure. And this is the guy that doesn't understand GDP, doesn't understand how inflation works, doesn't understand why he can't wave a magic wand and just forgive everybody's student debt. He wants you to pay for their debt over there. He doesn't understand why that's not possible. He is not a very smart man, except when it comes to using issues in a divisive way. And by the way, it's not just him. It's the entire party. This is what they've done. They've figured out that this succeeds. This gets people riled up, and so they keep going back to the well. And I worry that it is now getting so divided that it has become dangerous. This is the tipping point. And we need to do better than that. The Democrats need to stop that nonsense, really and truly, immediately. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on that. Great to have you guys here today. Wonderful, as I said, as always. Do make sure you subscribe. Go over and check out the Apple podcast. So if you're like walking, you can listen to it right there in your headphones or in your car. Go check it out. Do me the favor of following it. There's like a little plus sign in the right-hand side. There's like 3 little dots on your phone. You just hit that. You hit plus. You therefore subscribe to it. It's all there for free. And if you're so inclined, do leave a review and 5 stars if you would. Share this, spread the word, and I'll see you tomorrow.